Welcome back to Riley's Collection. I'm Riley, and today we're going to be doing a how to pose video on the Neca Haulathon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Alright guys, the theme for today's video is going to be
Teen Pose,
which essentially means I'm going to be taking each one of these Ninja Turtles here and posing them individually, and then at the end we're going to take all of those poses and combine them together into one team action shot. So this is going to be a pretty interesting one, and I think you're really going to like the results. So if you're a fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you're definitely going to want to stick around till the end for this one. But with that said, let's hop right into it. So let's start off with our main man, Leonardo. For our final pose, I'm gonna want all of the turtles kind of leaping into action, like they're about to face off against the Foot Clan or maybe the Krang or something like that. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take the head and make him look as far up as we possibly can. Then we're gonna take the arms and we're gonna raise those up and we're gonna cross his swords. I don't know how practical it would be for Leonardo to leap into action with his swords crossed, but it looks cool, so sue me. And then we're gonna take this leg, we're gonna move it all the way up and bend at the knee all the way in, point out his toes. And then this leg is just gonna be kind of straight back. Maybe you want a slight bend in the knee, but you could just have it straight like that. I personally prefer the slight bend in the knee. I think that looks a little bit more natural. And then we're almost done here. The last thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna take our flight stand and we're gonna put him on here. Now, the best way to do this, I've found, is he has his sword holders on the back here. If you take one of these clamps and you just find the bigger opening here, because there's this opening, but that's kind of a much smaller slit. This one is a much bigger opening, so you can just slip the clamp right into there and use that as your anchor point for the flight stand. So there is the first pose with Leonardo, and I'm not going to go too crazy here and show you a whole bunch of different angles because I do want to move on so we can get to that awesome final pose. But I think this is really cool, and you can get him a little bit better on the stand here. I kind of have him balanced on the arm of the stand at the moment, which isn't the most ideal way to do things, but this stand in particular that I'm using right now is just kind of loosey-goosey and it needs to be tightened up. So if you just grab a stand that is tighter, which I'll probably do before we get to the final pose, you should be able to get him on there a little bit better and get the arm of the stand more out of the way. And these are NECA figures, so the paint and detail is going to be spectacular. There are versions of these turtles that are the darker green skin rather than the lighter green. So if you prefer that colorway, you can get those turtles if you don't want to get these. But I actually really like the bright green. I don't think I really would have preferred one way or the other because I don't really care about accuracy to the show. And I think that both versions look great. These guys all do share the same articulation, which is a little bit limited just because of the nature of what they are. But clearly you can still get some really cool stuff going on with them. But with all that said, let's move on to the next one. So moving on to the next pose, we have Raphael, which happens to be my favorite turtle. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite turtle is. But for me, it's Raphael. And for Raphael here, we're gonna have the sai in his right hand, gripping onto it like this with it between his fingers. And then in the other hand, we're just gonna have him normally holding onto the handle. And our pose here for Raphael is going to be super simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to move his arm out to the side like this, pointing out to the enemy you're next buddy, you're going down kind of thing. And then move his head to follow suit. This arm, bend the elbow in he's ready to use the sai, but he's not quite using it yet, so it's just kind of on standby there. For the legs, we're going to move this leg out and bend in because he's going to be kind of lunging forward. And then this leg is just going to be out, and then bend the foot, use that ankle rocker there so we can get his foot flat on the ground. And booyakasha, that's going to be all there is to this one. We got to have Raph kind of being cocky and calling out his enemy, because as we all know, Raphael is cool but rude, and he's the one with the attitude. Or is it cool but crude? Can't remember. But yeah, again, nothing too complicated for this pose, nothing fancy, but it is gonna look great in the final shot. But with that said, let's move on to the next one. Okay, the next one up is Donatello here. You know, personally, I've never been too big of a Donatello fan. I mean, I love all the turtles, but he's definitely my least favorite. I apologize to any Donatello fans out there, but you know, clearly Raphael is the best turtle. Hit that like button if you agree. But for Donatello here, we're gonna have him running into action. And just like the rhino in the last how to pose I did, we're not gonna have him running the right way. The reason for that here is that if you want him running how people actually run, with the opposite arm and leg forward and backward. So like if this leg is forward, this arm should be forward and vice versa. With this, you can't really do that because there's only one point of articulation in the torso and it is very hindered by this front piece of the shell here. So we're gonna have to have him running the wrong way. And so we're gonna have his leg back like this, and then we're gonna move his other leg forward so that we can balance him on that point. He's gonna need to be looking forward to where he's running, and then this arm bent in like that to show that he's pumping his arms as he's running. This arm is just gonna be back. He's gonna be holding on to his bow staff in that hand. And the last thing that we're gonna do for this pose is move his little bandana piece upward to kind of give the illusion that it's blowing in the wind as he's running. And there we go, there's Donatello in his pose. It might take you a minute to get it balanced on his foot, but in this instance, I don't really think that it's that difficult. He's pretty easy to balance like that. Again, he's not really running the correct way, but I think it's more than serviceable for the purposes of what we're doing here. In the context of the photo, I don't think anyone's gonna be like, oh, what is he doing? You know, like obviously we know he's running. If I'm being brutally honest, like most people wouldn't even notice that it's wrong. Obviously we would want him to be running the correct way, but it's just a physical impossibility with this figure. So we're just gonna have to roll with this, and I do think it looks very good. All right, let's move on to the final turtle. Okay, we got the last turtle here, and that is gonna be Michelangelo. Unfortunately, my Michelangelo has some paint defects. You can see a little bit of black bleeding through on the M on the belt there, and he's also got some orange right here. So hopefully your Michelangelo doesn't have those issues. But regardless of that, Michelangelo's pose for this team pose is my favorite of the bunch. We're only gonna need one of his nunchucks for this pose. We don't need both, so you can take that and put it off to the side. But what we're gonna have him doing here is we're going to take the nunchucks and we're gonna have both hands gripping onto the nunchucks, move his head off to the side, and then bring this arm up like this, bend it in a little bit, make sure he's got his nunchuck in there all the way, and then the other arm, we're gonna move that outward, play around with it until you've got something kind of like that. Doesn't have to be anything too specific because they are not the focal point of his attack for this pose. He's actually gonna be doing a flying kick, so we're gonna raise this leg all the way up, just like that. And then this leg is going to be inward. So it should look something like that. And then maybe you could bend his foot in a little bit to make him look a little bit more natural with his kick. His bandana piece, again, you can move that upward, have him looking to the side. We are almost done. The last thing that we have to do here is put him on a flight stand. To get him on the flight stand, we're just gonna take the clamp and slip it into his belt as best we can. So it should go on something like that. Fiddle with it until you can get him in the right position. And once everything is said and done, you should be looking something kind of like this. Like I said, this one is my favorite. I absolutely love that you can get him to do this. Yes, the articulation is pretty limited with this, but you can still get them into some really, really fun poses. And this is definitely one of those poses. It shouldn't be too difficult to get him on the stand, but you might have some trouble with it. And if you do, as I always say, just be patient and take your time, and eventually you will get there. Because it's all about that dedication to the pose. But with that said, let's finally see them all together. And here it is, all together, all of the turtles here, ready to join the fight, and it just looks fantastic. These Neca turtles are just such great figures, and you can get some really nice poses out of them, even if they may be a little bit limited. I mean, they're still some of the best articulated Turtles figures out there. It's just that the Turtles themselves are just hard characters to make super articulated. But for me personally, this is more than serviceable, and if you were to do something like this on your shelf, it would just look so incredible. I've made them into like this sort of diamond formation here, and that is again simply so that you can see everything clearly, and we get to see a lot of every single one of the turtles in this pose. And here it is kind of zoomed out just so you guys can see everything going on here. And one of the great things about this pose is that it's not super difficult to achieve. For the turtles on the flight stands, obviously we're using their belts to clip them onto there, so you can't see those flight stands from the front, which is really great. I think the hardest part is just getting Donatello to balance on his foot, but even that's really not that difficult here. And all in all, for the most part, each one of these poses is kind of simple, but when you take 4 poses that were pretty simple on their own and put them all together, you end up with something that as a whole ends up looking pretty impressive. I can see you guys having a ton of fun taking pictures of this or poses similar to it, or even displaying it on your shelf, and I'm sure that if that's how you wanted to go with this, that anybody walking into your collection room would go, oh my gosh, that is so cool. Anybody who loves the turtles would see this and just think it's absolutely awesome. So guys, that's gonna be about it for my how to pose video on the Neca Holothon Ninja Turtles. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like. It really does help this channel out. And if you haven't subscribed already, hit that subscribe button, because on this channel, hitting subscribe gives you lifetime unlimited access to my collection. And I don't know about you, but that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Guys, I absolutely adore these figures. They're definitely not the most articulated figures ever, but that doesn't really matter to me at all because they look fantastic and you can still have a ton of fun with these guys. And as a massive Ninja Turtles fan, I absolutely had to have them. So if for some reason you don't already have these turtles, go find yourself some, see if you can get them for a good price, because I'm telling you, it's worth it. But with that said, have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.